Hey guys, thank you so much for watching today. I hope you're all doing well. I did a video a few weeks back about bar chords, and I got a comment from Eddie Madison 7792 asking a very good question. I'm gonna read this, so forgive me for looking off the screen here. I'm gonna read it, make sure I get it right, okay? So at 918, you're talking about the root note, that the root note is the note that gives the chord the name. For the A chord, I noticed that the chord actually sounds good if I play all 6 strings. So why are we taught to play 5 strings? And is the A string the root only to keep down confusion? Thanks. Okay. So to kind of re-summarize his question here, why is the root note what it is? And how come we don't play the other strings if they sound good? That's what I'm getting out of this. So I want to take a second and just talk about that because it's a really good question. And there are situations. Actually, you're right, Eddie. You're right. Like an A chord is a great example. That the 6th string is an E, which is actually in the chord, so it does sound good. And there's times that we would want to play it, and times that we would not want to play it. So we're going to take a second. We're actually going to look not too deep into the theory, but I am going to show you just a little bit about chord structure and how that works. And so give me just a second here. I'm going to pop this up. All right. So this is a chart that's showing me over here. I'm just going to orient you real fast. Over here on the left, these are all the keys. They're going in the order of cycle fourths, but these are all the different keys that we can have with flats and not sharps. So anyways, and if you go across left to right, those are all the notes inside of a key. So inside of the key of C, these are all the notes that are in there, right? And inside the key of E, these are the notes, and so on. We, for the example of this lesson, are going to use an A chord because that's what Eddie asked about. And so we're going to use 3 chords. We're going to use an A chord. I'm going to highlight these real fast in green. So we're going to do an A chord. We're going to do an E chord. And we're going to do a D chord. All right. So right now we're talking about chord structure, how they're built, and what notes are inside there. All right. So if we go back and we look at this, basically all that's happening is we're talking about a major chord, which is very basic. We just take the first note, the third note, and the 5th note, and that makes the chord. We'll go ahead and highlight that, change this to red. We're going to make the 3 and the 5 red, and we'll do that for the A chord and the D chord as well. Okay, so if we're looking at, real quick, if we're looking at the E chord, our notes are E, G sharp, and B, and the root note is E, right? In the key, in a chord, A chord, we have A, C sharp, and E, and the root note is A. In the D chord, we have F sharp and A, and the root note is D, right? Okay, good, simple. Now, let's just take a second and look at one other chart that kind of helps us see exactly what Eddie was talking about, that the E chord sounds good in an A chord. So let's jump over here. I got another chart here. It's just kind of showing the notes on the fretboard. If I zoom in here, I've actually already drawn up an A chord, okay? And you can see, like in a normal A chord chart, in fact, I have that here too. Our 3 chords are right here, okay? In a regular A chart, chord chart, you'd see there's an X right here. We shouldn't play that note. They're telling us not to do that. Okay, well, over here you can see, like just like Eddie said, the note shows up twice already. Why wouldn't I just play this? It sounds good. Okay, so we've established that the note E in this chord is there. All right, and the question is why? Why would we exit out? Why can't we just play it? That's a lot easier. And so I want to just show you one more thing. Okay, if we're looking at the 2 other chords we have here, E, there's no X's, so that doesn't matter. We're playing all those notes. But the D, you'll see that we do have an X'd out note there. And we also have another note here that below the root note, okay? And I'm going to show you kind of what's going on there as well, all right? If we were looking at a D chord, if we're looking at the D chord, you'll see that the note E actually is not in the chord. So if you play that E, it's actually going to sound kind of bad. So sometimes you can just use your ear and be like, well, that note is definitely not in the chord and it really does sound bad and I want to eliminate it. But other times, there'll be times that we want to play it and times that we don't want to play it. And I'm going to show you some examples of that. As mentioned, we're going to use an A chord and an E chord and a D chord. All right. So right out of the gate, E chord, I'm going to get this one taken care of first because we actually strum all those notes. There's nothing being muted there, so it really doesn't matter too much, all right? The D chord, on the other hand, as we established, if we're looking at our D chord structure, the note E is not in the chord, all right? And so if I play that, it actually doesn't sound great. So in this case, I'm just gonna take my thumb over the top and just touch that note so that it doesn't sound out. Now it's kind of dead. And now I can strum all the strings. And that tightens up that sound a little bit, all right? The A chord is the one in question that Eddie brought up. And he's correct. This note is in the chord, technically. It sounds fine. Okay? I can, just like the D, I can bring my thumb over and kill that note. Okay? And that's also fine. All right? So now, why would we do it sometimes and other times not? That's the question. Okay? The answer is, for the most basic, when we're playing guitar, okay, this might be different on piano sometimes, especially when we get into fancy slash chords and things like that. But for the most part, when a chord is played, we want the lowest note to be the root note because it kind of defines the sound of that chord. And also, when we're mixing chords together, when we're making a chord progression, we want that sound to change as we go from one chord to the next. So if we're playing an E to an A or other way around, and we make that change, but we let that E stay open between the two, the sound change isn't as noticeable. You'll notice I have a capo on the 2nd fret, and I'm saying E and A and all those things, but really it's different because of the capo, but these are the shapes we know and love. So I'm doing it with capo on the 2nd fret because this is actually a song. And so if you put a capo on the 2nd fret, you play A for 2 measures, E for 2 measures, D for 2 measures, and then back to A, you've got Yellow by Coldplay. And so that's kind of cool, kind of fun. Anyways, if you think about just the root notes, okay? I'm just gonna play through the root notes of the A, and then I'm going to E, D, A. Okay, if I'm not paying attention to that, I'm just kind of strumming all of my chords. My E's and my E to the A changes, or the A to the E change, excuse me, is going to be a little more like this. You can see you don't hear the change as much. It's not as pronounced. It is a subtle difference, but it's not as pronounced. All right. And so if you're playing with your open notes, sometimes if you're strumming with a pick, that open E string will just really resonate, and sometimes you don't even hear the chord change. It's pretty bad. And so that's the main reason that we would mute those notes out, and that's the practice. So if you're not sure, if you're just strumming, kind of a rule of thumb, if you're just strumming, then mute those notes out. Make sure that the root note of the chord is the lowest note sounding out, and that'll be the best, tightest sound. Now, let's give an example of where we would use those, okay? The best example for where we would use notes that aren't the root note as the lowest note, and that's where we're getting into slash chords, is finger picking, or kind of hybrid picking where we're strumming and picking at the same time. That's one place where we would alternate the bass line to create a little more interesting sound, and we would use those notes to our advantage. So I'm going to use those same 3 chords, okay? I've got A, but I'm going to incorporate this fun little picking pattern, or I call it a boom chick. So I'm going to pluck the root note, and then I'm going to flick these high notes with my, I'm just going to give you a better view of this, okay? So I'm just playing the A chord here, but I'm just going to pluck the root note, and then I'm going to flick the high notes with my finger like that. So I kind of got this 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and that sounds cool. Like if I was maybe doing like a folk song or something, but it's a little bit boring if I'm just doing this the whole time. So what we would do is we would alternate. We'd play the root note first, and then another note in the chord. That low one sounds real nice, so that's where I'm going to incorporate that E because it sounds great as an alternate. I'm going to jump over to the E, that my root note's here now. And then the D, if you remember, if you're looking at the D chord, so this note's A, so is this note. This is another A. And so it can be played, but we would play that first, all right? Anyways, so if you look here, I'm playing the D chord, doing that alternate. There we go, okay? So to sum it up, Eddie, yes, you were right. And that's a good ear that you noticed that that note does sound good. It is part of the chord and can be played with the chord. The bigger thing is having taste as when to play it and when not to play it. So generally speaking, if you're strumming, you want the root note to be the lowest note. So for examples like the D and the A, you would want to try to mute out the E chord at the very least. The D chord, it's a little bit hard to mute out the E and the A. So I generally let the A play open, but I definitely mute out that E because it's not part of the chord, okay? But like an A chord, you want to mute out that E string so that it's not stealing the A's thunder, if that makes sense. But if you're doing finger picking and doing some alternate bass lines and stuff, actually incorporating those lower notes as an alternate to the root note is actually really great taste. Sounds awesome, and it's a lot of fun. So there you go. I hope that helps. Please, if this brought up other questions, or if you have other questions, leave them in the comments. It inspires me. It gives me things to teach you guys. And if you haven't already, like and subscribe, please. That helps me. The algorithm helps me get going here. And also, probably most important, if you're interested in lessons and learning how to play guitar better, please reach out to me. I'd love to help you. We'll talk to you the next one.